Hello class. In this video, I'm sure showed this other places because I use a variation of it so many times, but just if you just want a quick go to it in this series, I'm just going to use this sort of angled stroke texture. Again, a lot of times I want to create texture. It can really be anything, it can be abstract, but I just don't want it to be a solid grained field, or in this case green, but any color you're dealing with. Adding a simple angled stroke texture to it works perfectly well. This is the basic format. I often will apply that in sort of many different ways with other textures. So for example, much more subtly, here's the angled stroke, but it's got gradients across it, it's got inner glows and various other things to pull out that texture a little bit. But that little bit of texture in these in-between spots is really important for making the drawing come alive, right? So I'm going to show you how to do that in this video. And so I'm going to go to some blank. Oh, there's some other examples here. I'm going to go to my blank pages here. I'm going to start with setting a color. So I've been using green. I'll turn off the stroke, but you don't necessarily have to do that. And here's the thing. Basically, the base of this effect is angled strokes. So I can go to brush strokes, angled stroke, right? And we can see what happens though when I run it like this. Nothing shows up. So I'm going to cancel out of there. And a lot of the Photoshop effects down in here won't do anything when you have just a solid single fill color. So often to get any of these to work up here, you need to apply some sort of texture to begin with. And so in this case, I will apply grain, set from my last video. It was vertical there, but just go with the regular grain, and you can set it to something that works, and this is all changeable depending on any number of factors, so you might go with this. Now this is going to do sort of a colored version of these strokes, because we can see the grain is naturally has this color quality to it. You can do it monochromatic. If you want to do it monochromatic, you got to go up to artistic and you got to go to film grain. And we can see when I go to film grain, it has the same effect except for it's in a monochromatic color scale, in this case being green. But I'll do the colored version, so I'll go to regular grain rather than fill grain to get sort of more vibrancy in color. But it's whatever you like to do. So I'll say OK. Once I've applied that grain, I can go ahead and then I can apply many of these other ones because there's pixels to play off of. So I'll go to angled strokes, and we can see right there it already looks right. I usually set my direction all the way to 100%. That makes the angles go sort of in all one direction. You can see that it got 45. You can see if I'm like around here, they're sort of going in cross directions. Some are going right and some are going left, which might be an effect you want. It works perfectly well. I happen to like sort of going in one direction, so I set it to 100. And then your stroke length, the higher it is, the longer the strokes are, the smaller it is, the shorter they are, whatever you sort of prefer. And again, sharpness changes ever so slightly. Maybe you can't even see that on YouTube, but set it to what you like, and so we can apply that. And I'll take a second to go, and there we go. That's the angled strokes, just a little bit of texture. Now there are lots of things we can do on this. So if I were to really quick just save this in graphic styles, if we're going on and editing a little bit further, I'll turn this one also into angled strokes. I will set the color to be the blue color I work with here. There we go. So that simple can be reused. I'm going to add a darker blue line just to keep the edge. The angled strokes does break down the edge a little bit, so sometimes just by adding a line around it you can deal with this. Or alternatively, I can actually take the grain and put it into the fill rather than the whole object. Oops, I got to select the object here. So see, in my appearances dialog box, this grain and this stroke is applied to the whole object right now, both the stroke and the fill. So I'm going to drop it just into the fill here. And when it re-renders it, we can see the line now doesn't do that. So it sort of cleaned up the edge a little bit, right? I'm going to approach this guy a little differently to do some extra effects. You could do the stroke, but it's going to start from the same point. I'm going to put the grain and the angle stroke within just the fill. It's not going to change the appearance of this one because that's the only thing I have in it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start by adding the inner glow effect to it, like we saw on the one site plan I showed. And so to do that, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to take these guys out of there. I only need them in the green. I'm going to change this top color to white. All right, I'm going to do this without changing the opacity at first so we can see what's happening. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to white. I'm going to go to Effect. I'm going to go to Stylize. I'm going to go to Inner Glow. And I'm going to set it to, say, a dark green color. I already had mine preset up here. Dark color, whatever color you want, usually a color that's similar to the lighter color underneath. My settings are as such, although again yours might be different based on the scale of your drawing, and I'll say OK. And we can see that adds this dark gray fuzz out in towards the center. And so what I'll do is I'll just change my opacity down, blending mode, to multiply. And that will remove all the white areas and see what's underneath. So now it looks like I've got this, what I had done, this green strokes sort of fading out to a darker green. And so already that adds an interesting effect that I'll use a lot. And then if you want to, again, further do even sort of more interesting things, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll add another fill. And so I'll just duplicate this fill. I'll actually, again, I only need the grain and angle strokes on the bottom fill in this for this particular experiment. So I'll select both of those. I'll delete those. And this is going to be a little subtle, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to change it to gradient. We'll let that go. So gradient. I'm going to go to gradient. I'm going to change both my colors to the same color. Not the color that we've been using. Usually for greens I'll use yellows, so I'll just select this standard yellow that Illustrator has. I'm going to set both sides to the same color. Again, you don't necessarily need to do that, but that's often what I will do. So it's all yellow. If I were using blue, it might be a purple, for example, things like that. Just a similar but non-identical color. And I'm going to take one of these sides, doesn't really matter which one, and I'm going to take the opacity and turn it all the way to 0. So it's basically going to go a yellow to a fade of nothing. A lot of times people get confused. They do yellow to white and then make the white transparent. That will then start to fade to white as it goes to transparent, so it won't do this exact same effect. We can see that it's the only way to get yellow to transparent is to make them both the same color, yellow in this case. So I've got that going. I can set a direction, whatever direction you want to go. I'll just pull mine diagonally, sort of match the strokes. But we can see the yellow now blocks out the strokes that are happening underneath. So I'll go back to my appearances and I'll set my blending mode of this to something like color, so that way the color of what's or the texture of what's underneath is going to be changed to the color of what's on the top. So the texture of the grain is going to accept the yellow of the gradient. All right. And now if you find that yellow too strong or not, you can just play with the transparency if desired. Again, all these settings are needed. So if I make that middle part somewhat transparent, it's going to bring a little bit more green down into that area. And so that's sort of on the more complicated end of just doing a texture will do. But here's what this looks like. It works in many situations because oftentimes you just want to add some texture. You don't care to make it look exactly like something in the real world, either media or an object or whatever. It's just got to have texture to have interest. There's grain, angled strokes, that's the basis. Then any other thing you want to put on top of it, that's great. So have fun with that. Let me know if there's anything else you want me to do, and I will see you in the next video.